as you said earlier, there was a time when there was this very high standard that you had to reach to get into to qualify for teacher training. But that standard was purely your asana kind of advanced level, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you have to be able to do full back bend for like 10 breaths and balance in handstand or whatever it was. You said balancing in headstand. So there were these things that were supposedly benchmarks of your physical accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel like we went through this phase. I've been teaching I've been teaching a long time. For me, this is my 24th year. There was this phase where I feel like all of the yoga studios realized, wow, teacher training is actually a great way for us to make a lot of money. And so it really just became about, hey, apply, and if you can afford to pay, you're in, which I think is great, and of course it's also great to be able to offer scholarships and be able to include people who otherwise might not be able to do teacher training but would really love to and would be of benefit to the world in really important ways. But I feel like it's turned into this thing now where everyone is friends with or related to someone who's in yoga teacher training, right? People do a lot of different trainings. Again, all of this is great. The proliferation of yoga is great. But because of this more extroverted culture of creating image, and because of, I think, how teacher trainings have in some ways become really oversimplified, what's often lacking is the tolerance for the deeper conversation. Right? And I know you and we really try and emphasize this in our training. Like, yes, we're training you to be able to teach the basics of a yoga class in a safe way. You're a brand new teacher. It's overwhelming learning all this technique and anatomy and how to language it and getting comfortable in front of the room. And, we address all of that. But at the same time, there is a deep, long-term, nuanced, very substantive conversation to have about all these different issues, to have about what does it mean to integrate a psychological awareness into how you're teaching yoga and into your own yoga practice. What does it mean to integrate a social justice awareness, a socio-political awareness? What does it mean to really look at your language and really think about, okay, what are we doing here? What's yoga for? What does it mean to start to challenge some of the outdated dualisms that said the body is not sacred, and the body is something to be dominated and mastered and beat into submission and push through the pain that you experience so that you're no longer as attached to being comfortable, and then you'll have this transcendent moment where you see God, because God or the sacred is somehow different than the icky body that pees and poops and has sex and eats food, right? And has like tension and gets older and all of these things. So that conversation, I feel, is so essential and so important as a new teacher to really get comfortable going, okay, these are the big questions of life that I'm going to be wrestling with and thinking about and learning about for a long, long time. And they're under the surface of how I'm going to teach. Because how I teach and how I hold space for people is an expression of how my process is unfolding around these big questions.
Yeah, and I think that, some of this is also developmental. I mean, there's people in their early 20s entering into teacher training, right? And so I know in my early 20s, I was not interested in a more complex and nuanced idea of the world. I wanted it to be very black and white and prescriptive. And so I think that's important to consider, right? That we're teaching concepts that also take a certain amount of life experience to know to be true. So if we're going to hold that space for students, there has to be a certain level of maturity. And so I don't think there's anything wrong. And I know we tell our students this all the time. If you're 25 years old, 20 years old, and you just did a teacher training, just teach a safe down dog. And don't harm people. And know that as you mature and develop, you'll be able to hold a different space. And so I think there's place for all of it. There's place for, I'm just going to go and stretch and breathe and move. I think what's dangerous is when those younger teachers, or regardless of age, young in terms of maturity, somehow equate that with the ultimate goal. So, I started teaching fitness when I was in my 20s. That's what I had the capacity for, is we're going to get our heart rate up and burn some fat, right? That was really authentic. That's where I was at. I didn't understand these larger issues. So it's always interesting to consider that and invite teachers to teach for what is authentic for them. And if these ideas are things they're really grappling with, just to make sure that they don't feel pressure to act as if they know more than they know. And there's something valid about a safe physical practice where we're breathing and moving.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens, I think there's a lot of pressure for teachers to feel like they have figured something out, even if they're 25 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and they become, the priest and the life coach and the nutritionist and the therapist to their
Yeah.
students,
Yeah.
and they feel split inside. They
Yep.
feel pressure to know it all. So that's a really important conversation with teachers is where are you at?
Mm-hmm.
What can you hold space for?
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
going to change as you grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So important. I love how you're framing it, Hala, and it comes back around to something I was trying to sort of grasp onto earlier in the conversation, which is that because we have an extroverted, image conscious culture, right? We want benchmarks of progress,
Yeah.
and we've latched on to something about, well, can you get your leg behind your head? Can you balance in this impressive looking pose, right? How flexible are you in the splits? And underneath that, I think there's actually a way that we might be longing for more internally referenced kind of indicators of progress, right? And to embrace that there really is a path, and there really are stages that we go through, and there are insights that we come to that are pretty good over time, and that's okay, that's actually really good. And so to embrace, I'm a young teacher, I've taken a teacher training, maybe I've been practicing yoga for like 3-4 years, I did my teacher training, I enjoy teaching, and I'm still on that path. And that path is one not just of buying into quasi-religious, yoga philosophy beliefs, and just if I just believe this strongly enough, then I make progress. Not one of, okay, it's great to be able to do all sorts of different postures as your practice unfolds, but as we both know, for a lot of people, the longer they do yoga, the more they find, oh, I'm getting older, I need to modify certain things, I'm learning things about my body where maybe my joints were unstable, and this thing that I used to aspire to, or this thing that I used to be able to do that my yoga teachers were so impressed by, maybe it was not so sustainable or good for my body. So there's all of that. And so how to keep fostering this sense that there's an inner journey, and I don't mean that in any kind of far out metaphysical way, that there's a journey that has to do with your self-awareness, that has to do with how you are in relation to your emotions, and how you inhabit your body, and what kind of skill set you have around working with different states of mind. And that takes time. That's not something you learn very quickly in a teacher training. That's not something you just grasp by reading a spiritual book and then you're there, right? It's this process. And so how to honor all phases of that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that again, having teachers with different voices and different emphasis is really important. I often joke that I would have never taken my own class 20 years ago. Couldn't have tolerated it. I needed something much faster and much sweatier, and so I would have never come back to yoga had I walked into that class. So there's like different doorways in, and we have to meet people where they're at and slowly invite them towards the next stage. If we're too far away from where they're at, the work isn't going to resonate. And so that's why I feel like we have such a diversity of ages in our teacher training. I mean, we've got from mid-20s to mid-60s in our training. And it's so fun to see the different ways that the people are teaching in the training just based on their life experience. And it's all really, really valuable. And, I always say whatever habits we have on our mat, we have everywhere in our life. And so I feel like that's what you're speaking to, that the inner journey is one of self-reflection. I always say that yoga is a practice of self-care, self-reflection, and self-accountability, of really becoming accountable to ourselves. And the poses are the means by which we get there. So to your point before, not to minimize, not to bypass the importance of sound alignment, knowledge of anatomy. That's vital. What happens is it's like the boat gets mistaken for the shore. Those are the tools. The goal is self-awareness, health on many levels.
We had this whole conversation actually the last weekend in the training, you just used the boat and the shore metaphor. I got
Yeah.
into the whole finger pointing at the moon thing, right?
Yeah.
The finger is pointing at something so awe-inspiring and so beautiful and so of the essence. It's the heart of the matter, and yet we can very easily get very preoccupied with manicuring the finger and debating how many knuckles and all of this kind of stuff. It's like, wait, there's something more that is being gestured towards, and of course the vehicle is important, the boat is important, but what are we really doing here?